Hello, this is Big Red, and you're listening to the Big Red for America show. So nice to be back. I'm here with my producer, Mark. After a little bit of a hiatus, we've decided to come back and just have one of our dialogues again about some of these pressing issues facing the country today. Say hello, Mark.
Hello, it's good to be back. It's been a couple months since I've been on the show, I think. Maybe two or three, I would guess.
Always great, always nice to have you on. Appreciate your viewpoints, a little bit different than I think I would than what I would say.
Yeah,
So it's great to
that's important. That's important nowadays to have those, even if it's the same kind of arena, but have the different views talked about.
absolutely. So I think we've kind of had some different ideas of what to talk about today. I think we'll start off first with the student loan forgiveness plan. Biden recently announced that I think applications are now up that you can start applying for student loan forgiveness. He did end up going through with $10,000 worth of forgiveness. The timing is, of course, very suspect. This close to the midterms, but it's never let a political crisis go to waste, especially as Biden is sinking further and further into political obscurity.
Yeah, it's if you look at what he's doing, it's definitely timing's kind of strange, but at the end of the day, the student loan forgiveness is basically a tax on every blue collar person that didn't go to college. So what, over half of the US. So the question is going to be, is it a really poor move? Because a lot of those blue collars are going to see that their stuff's like, it's not fair. There's no way around it. It's not a fair system. The way he's doing it. Now, I do think there is a way to do student loan forgiveness that would be fair, but the way he's doing it is basically saying, doesn't matter what your degree is, doesn't matter what you went to school for, doesn't even matter what your job is. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, the numbers he has right now for the student loan forgiveness, like the amount of income you would have, is kind of outrageous because it's not as if these people that he's allowing to forgive student loan are poor, middle or lower income Americans. He's saying like $100,000 income. Now, the poor society or the lower income are not making $50,000 a year, let alone $100,000 a year. So the idea that he's doing this to help out the middle class and the lower class is just, it's just not true. It's a blatant lie. And the idea he's doing this to help out, to help out society has nothing to do with the midterms. Like you said, there's no way you can count that timing. He's basically buying votes.
Totally. I would almost be
Yeah.
I'd almost be insulted at this point. I get it. He kind of waited a little bit. I remember Nancy Pelosi saying, "Oh, that's not something Biden can do. It's going to have to be an act by Congress." But lo and behold, Biden
Yeah.
comes out and then rolls out this plan. So I would be insulted, like, "Oh, you could have done this at the beginning, but now you waited for, 2 years before you decided to roll out this plan." I would definitely find that insulting.
Yeah. And I think he knows it's not really legal, but he knows that there's no way for anybody to counteract him on it. Even though there are some legal battles out there right now, there's actually a really good podcast I was listening today on one of my flights that was Ted Cruz's podcast, so The Verdict with Ted Cruz. And he talks very specifically about why he doesn't think this is going to get overturned in the courts. And it's interesting because he is a pretty well-versed law scholar. I mean, Supreme Court, all that stuff, but he basically goes through that legally there's not much you can do to prove anything where it'll cancel the debt forgiveness that he wants to do. So it's probably going to go through from what I can tell. And then the way they rush it, like right now they have the application out there so you can apply for it. So if they start giving student loan forgiveness now, I don't think you can stop that from happening once it's started.
No,
Um,
as soon as that first person gets the $10,000 worth of relief, it's just gonna be a snowball. You're not gonna be able to try to stop that, because then the people who didn't get it in time, of course, are gonna complain, and then it'll be a whole nother issue of like equal protection and stuff like that. So it's just gonna be an absolute
yeah,
disaster.
and the truth is too is it's not the first student loan forgiveness he's done. It's he actually has forgiven a lot of student loan forgiveness already, and no one talks about it. But it's all for government employees, so he's basically benefiting the people that work for him. So it's kind of like if you look into it, the stuff he's already forgiven. Basically, it doesn't matter your degree is. If you work for the government, they'll just give back your student loans. So he's turning it into a lack of a better word, a socialist society where you work for the government, you're good. If you don't work for the government, we're going to screw you with taxes. We're going to screw you with this. And that's basically how he's looking. It seems like that's how he's looking at it.
And I forget where I heard this from. I feel like it was from economist Thomas Sowell, but don't quote me on that. But that when you have a high level of degrees, useless degrees that we're seeing like right now with a lot of these, like for example, gender studies, like in a market economy, there's no demand for that degree at all. So you are by default, all of that extra supply of these people coming out with all this debt, they can't get a job. The natural streamline for these people is back into the arms of the governments, and especially if the government's going to bribe them with forgiveness, so the government can kind of artificially even increase the number of bureaucrats just by this process of getting non-profitable degrees and encouraging people to get these non-profitable degrees. And you hinted at that a little bit at the beginning, where Biden doesn't care what kind of degree you got. It doesn't even have to be a useful degree. It can be an absolutely useless degree.
Yeah, and that's kind of how he's buying votes, right? Is because it's so blatantly obvious. It doesn't matter what you do or what your degree is or where you even went to school or anything. It's just like a blatant forgiveness. Now, there's nothing like that ever in history or any time that's ever been done. And it just doesn't seem appropriate, right? Mm-hmm. Like if I went to Harvard and became a doctor and had $200,000 in debt, and let's say I'm just out of school, I'm not yet making the money that a doctor normally, because I'm maybe 2 years into it, I can get $20,000 forgiven, depending on the loan I have. Mm-hmm. Or I could be a student, let's say, that does women's gender ballet studies or something like that, and I can get the same amount forgiven. But let's say I get out of college and I go work for the tech industry, making $200,000 a year. Like there's no even playing field on how they're grading it. It's just like, mm-hmm. Here's an income. So it doesn't make much sense on kind of where the line, like it seems like it was something that they were searching Reddit forums and searching web, and they were like, oh, this is a good idea. We should do this. Like there wasn't much thought put behind it.
No, and absolutely not. Flipping through, not that these are exact percents by any stretch, but I have here CNBC says that 50% of all student debt, like gross, is held by graduate students, so students who have more than a bachelor's, so a master's or a doctorate. So those account for 50% of all student debt. And like you said earlier, we're really going to have blue collar workers pay for your doctorate in gender studies or your doctorate in medicine. So while you're working for that first year and not making over $125,000, you're going to get that forgiven. Like that is going to transfer over to the blue collar workers. He pins it as in like, I'm helping the middle class, where most of this money is going towards those with advanced degrees beyond bachelor's. And then Senator Warren says that 40% of people who have student loan debt don't even have a college diploma. So between the 40% of people, according to Senator Warren, that don't have a diploma and the 50% that have an advanced degree beyond a bachelor's, I mean, that's 90% of the people that have student loan debt right there. Now, I don't know if those numbers actually end up correlating, but it's interesting when you think about it. Why are we paying for people who didn't get a degree? And then why are we paying for people with an advanced degree? Because in theory, with a doctorate or a master's, you should make enough money to be able to pay off your own student loans.
Yep. And then as you mentioned, just basic economic incentives. If you set that where it's basically guaranteed you're going to get $10,000 student loan or anything, that's just going to drive colleges to raise the prices of schools. Mm-hmm. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't fix the problem which there is a problem with college costs and things along those lines. I mean, it's kind of like the healthcare system. There's definitely an issue with the way it is currently. But the way to fix it is not pumping money into it and basically saying, okay, now you guys can, again, raise the cost of school, make it unattainable, so no one can actually use it the way it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. That seems like the way he's moving.
So you talked about that you have a different way that we could maybe do student loan forgiveness. And I think this would be really interesting to kind of flesh out. So what are your thoughts about like alternative ways to to deal with this crisis?
Yeah, so my idea is pretty simple, but you have the colleges pay for it. And this is what I would say. Anybody who has, and the issue becomes what the time frame would be for kids who want to for the colleges. But basically, if you went to a college and you got a degree as an accountant, and let's say you did it in Arizona, when you graduate, maybe for the first 5 or 10 years while you're trying to get on your feet, when you get a job in your field or whatever your job is outside of college, it basically comes down to whatever the median salary for that person for in that area of that career, the college will pay the difference. So if a normal person who's an accountant gets out of college in the first 2 years, they make $30,000, and the next 2 years they on average make 40,000, and as it goes up. But if you come out and you're only making 20, the college would have to pay the $10,000 difference on the student loans, because basically you were told you were going to get that education for that, and you're not getting the payment for it. So I think that incentivizes, instead of the people going to school to do it, it would incentivize the schools to be better educating the people that are going to school there, because it'd force them to stop allowing people to do stupid degrees, like ballet dance for women's studies or something crap like that. Because if I get that degree and I take $50,000 of that, and then I'm only going to make $20,000 a year, the school has to make up that difference.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So if the school has to make up that difference, they're not going to be teaching people those things, because then they have to waste $30,000 of their own money. So it puts it directly into their pocket where they have to make the decision, or vice versa. If you go to, whatever school and you become an accountant and they give you a shitty education, you get out and you can only get a job that's $10,000 below whatever the market value of that degree is. Well, that school then has to either make their teachers better or their program better, or they have to lower the cost of their school. So I feel like that would solve all the situations, because then the incentive is no longer on the people in school to the students to make the best of it, and the colleges just exploit that as much as possible. It becomes an issue of the colleges themselves have to then control the education and the costs of the students they're supposed to be teaching. That to me is basically the only way I've heard or I can think of that would be a fair way for student debt relief. Because, for example, for me, if this was put into effect, I could go back to Robert Morris, where I went to school, and I could say, okay, this is what the average degree of, someone my age outside of school for so long with this degree, this is what they should be making. Whatever the difference, if I'm making less than that, they have to forgive that debt. Right? But also too, I went vice versa. If I'm making more, then they don't have to forgive the debt. So there's an incentive for them to actually educate me and have me be successful outside of school. I think that would make it a much better situation for everyone involved.
What's interesting, some of my thoughts about that would be like, what if you were to intentionally like try to sandbag, take a lower paying job for, whatever the stretch is, in hopes that you would get a substantial portion of your debt forgiven, and then maybe switch to a higher paying job.
Well, I think you'd have to put it on a sliding scale. Like, the math would have to get figured out, in the sense of, if you are your first year out of college, you're obviously not going to be making the same amount as your 10 years into your career. So like, there'd have to be a sliding scale that shows like progress towards whatever you're doing, right? And I think it would also incentivize the schools to put extra investment in making sure you place yourself outside of schools. So if I went to again Robert Morris and I got a degree doing something, there would be incentive for them to either not allow me to go to school there if I wasn't performing, or maybe that class I had, which just was totally a thing, where the teacher was totally checked out and just gave everyone A's because they didn't care. Like, that can't be a thing anymore, because it'll cost the colleges money, right? So they'll have to weed people out. It'll be no longer, it's kind of like, you ever heard of Mike Rowe? He's the guy from 30 Jobs. He talks about all the time where college is a waste of money. If you want to make $200,000 a year, you can go do it as a plumber, or you can go do it as a trade school. But I think by doing this, what my theory is on the way it would work, it would allow, there's more value in not taking the direct school college route, there would be other options you could take, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe become a tradesman of some nature, right,
Mm-hmm.
become, instead of the dude who was just going to go to college because his mom said you have to go to college, maybe he goes, well, wait, if I do that, and let's say I rack up all this debt and the colleges won't forgive it, because that's the other thing. If I go to school and I do women's studies or something, some major that doesn't make money, I'm not in a school costs 50,000 and the average salary is 30,000, right? I'm still going to be in debt because the average salary of the degree I got is 30,000. So then me just going for the sake of going to college is no longer an option. It's
Mm-hmm.
better. I will then have because the simple math makes it where, like, why am I going to risk having $20,000 in debt when I could go to trade school at that point, or I could go directly into the workforce at that point? So it just like shifts the perspective of who's in control of the outcome, and it puts more of the onus on non-students and on the schools again to kind of control costs.
And I
Yeah.
do agree with you. I think the way forward to actually fixing the college issue is going to be through restricting or lowering costs on their end, however it's going to be, whether it's going to be refusing entry for low performing degrees like gender studies, for example, or whether it'll be kind of like you said, whether they're going to bear the brunt, but that's where the costs needs to get shifted. It needs to get shifted, at least in part, to the schools. But right now, they just know that the money's running free through the federal government. So their incentive is to make as much money as you can while the getting's good, inflate their prices because they know the government's going to keep lending money, and there's really no incentive to lower prices at all.
Yep. And it would force them to focus on education, which is another thing, right? Like I was just reading, I believe it was Harvard did something like we're now, something like 65 or 70% of the people who work at Harvard are administrative, and something like 40% of them are in inclusion, diversity, and equity, administrative stuff. So like stuff that has nothing to do with education or anything Harvard should be involved with, really. So it kind of makes it so like you can't hire if there's an incentive to educate people so they're successful out of school, you can't be hiring a bunch of fluffy BS jobs just to fill requirements from whatever, right? Like you can't do that because they go out of business. There's no way around that. And it would put more competition on the teachers too, because there would have to be a better education system. Because if a school hires a teacher where every student that comes out of it is making $10,000 less than whatever the local median is, well, that teacher's not going to last long because it's costing the school money. Yeah. So that teacher's either going to have to get better, or they're going to have to get a new teacher or new curriculum or something, change something. So these tenured people who've been doing it for 20 years who checked out, well, they're no longer going to be allowed to do that because it costs the school money at that point. And even if a student checks himself out, like I said, a student goes in and let's say the dad's a super rich person and just says, oh, no, I got you and I paid for a building or whatever at your school. You got in. Well, that kid, if he's not putting in the work, the school is not going to let him graduate. Because if he graduates and he's making less, then they have to then foot the bill for the rest of it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, so the incentive then is to weed out all the people who don't want to be there, or the low performers, or people who shouldn't be on that career path for different reasons. It'll just help kind of move everything to a more equal, not equitable, but equal opportunity.
So, and my thoughts, I think I wrote a piece on the student debt crisis probably last year sometime, and my thoughts were towards fixing the student loan crisis would be to, number one, first and foremost, stop government, the vast majority of government lending to most degrees. If we could still give Pell Grants, of course, to low income students that show promise, academic promise into going to college. But my thoughts would be to maybe reduce loans to those whose field would produce some sort of return on investment, like a lot of the STEM majors, medicine, engineering, stuff like that, like some of those sciences that will produce that the country will actually benefit from, and will produce, like I said, a return on investment, because there is money to be made in engineering and medicine and some of those more scientific fields. And then we'll
Yeah,
keep
they'd have
the
to trim the fat, right? Like
mhm,
if you did it that way, they'd have to trim the fat.
mhm,
There's no way around it.
mhm. So colleges would have to lower their prices because not everyone's getting a loan. So if you wanted to go to college for a fluffy degree, you can get a private loan to go for that, which is, of course, going to be more expensive for the borrower, which in return means less people will be going to college, which would mean that the college would have to lower their prices in order to get more people in their doors. Because right now, the current model is just, get as many students in as you can, and if colleges are going to keep up that model, they would have to necessarily lower prices in order to be affordable and to keep their doors open.
Yeah, it would actually go one step even further than that, right? Because it wouldn't even be you'd have to get a private loan to pay for the college. The college is as invested financially into it as you are themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there is a direct consequence if the college is not successful in educating you.
Mm-hmm.
So, because the college has its own bank on the line, if you will, finance on the line, they have a huge incentive in you being successful and
Mm-hmm.
making sure you're well educated. They also have a huge incentive of not taking people in that shouldn't be in college, right? People that would be better in different careers. And they also have a huge incentive on not raising prices, because if they know they have to foot the bill, like if it actually costs $40,000 a year for someone to go to school at a college, but they're charging 60, well, they'll stop charging 60 because the risk of them having to cover the extra bit is too high.
Mm-hmm.
So they would force them to lower the price just to cover the risk side of it. And then also the schools, like I would imagine as time went on and teachers became once this would be put into effect, a teacher that is successful or has a track record of everyone that goes through their program ends up getting placed in a good career and being successful in their career, a good teacher, those people will be celebrated, not because they're tenure and they've been there a while, but because their results are actually results, right? So the incentive of like, it's just every incentive becomes pro the student and less pro the school
Mm-hmm.
in every way, which is the way it should be. And even the aspect of not going to college, which is most people, 99% of people don't need to go to college. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I'd even wager STEM is the only people that need to go to college,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's it. If you want to be in the STEM or maybe in journalism or some of the other stuff like that, but like most of the degree, I would wonder if this ever took effect, how many degrees got dropped by each college? Like, would it go down by 50%? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I bet it would be some drastic number. Like 50% of degrees got dropped. Like they just don't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely, because you know that those degrees are there. I went to a way more conservative college, so we didn't have any of the liberal fluff degrees like gender studies, like underwater basket weaving, feminist dance, or anything like that. But you could graduate with a degree in worship, for example, like to be a worship leader in a church, which is in most churches around the United States is an unpaid position.
Okay.
That's just something you volunteer for. Like you absolutely don't need a degree for that. And same with like youth ministry, for example. You could actually major in youth ministry. Once again, a position at most churches that is volunteer. So
Yeah.
these students were taking on debt and would, in theory, most of them probably never be able to pay it off.
Yep. The other thing too is, so the same example. So let's say it's a youth ministry thing, like you were mentioning. In that case, let's say it was a paid position, like the average salary, let's say, because it's just youth ministry, let's say it's $20,000 a year, right?
Mhm.
That's like minimum wage, pretty
Mhm.
much. If that's the case, that same school will have to charge a different amount per degree.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, if someone goes to that school to be a doctor, obviously doctors make more than $20,000 a year, even straight out of school.
Mm-hmm.
So the school will be able to charge more to go through the doctorate program, which
Mhm.
makes sense because a doctor's a more educated field than a youth minister.
Mhm.
Just by definition, you have to know more things to be a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
than you do, just technically, right?
Mhm.
But they can't, it doesn't mean they'll necessarily get rid of the degree for the youth ministry. They just can no longer charge the same amount it would cost to become a youth minister as it does to become a doctor, because the
And
incentive doesn't allow them to do that.
in your plan, what would happen like if you didn't get a degree? Like, would you get any loan forgiveness?
That's a good question. I would, off the cuff, I would say it would depend on the school and the program you're in.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, I think it's a shared thing. So like when you go to school there, you have to be under an agreement with the college. So let's just use Robert Morris again. If I go there for school, I have to, while I'm getting accepted there, the school needs to vet me as someone who's actually interested in going to school there,
Hmm.
right? I would imagine some of it gets forgiven if I don't graduate. If I just drop out, also some of it's on me. So maybe it's like I do think you have to pay for it yourself. So it's not like the school is paying for it outright, because there has to be an incentive for you to stay in school and be successful at it. So if I'm the student, maybe it's $30,000 a year to go to Robert Morris to do political whatever, and let's say I'm into it, I want to do it, I do it for 2 years and I quit just out of my own free will. Well, I'm still out of pocket for that money, so I still owe it. Because I made a commitment, I said I was going to do it, and I didn't do it. Now, if I stuck it through, and I end up, so I'm, $120,000 in debt, we'll say, if it's 4 years, and I get through, and then I'm below whatever the median wage is, then I still have to pay it back, still paying back to college, but they have to make up the difference between the minimum and the other. So vice versa, if it's a political degree or whatever, and let's say instead of making below minimum wage, I'm making $30,000 more. It's not like I would I'd have to owe more. I just have to pay back the loans like normal because I'm making the income to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because I'm just wondering, because they're talking about almost half of student loan borrowers don't have a degree, so it's like it'd be interesting to see what percentage of those who don't have a degree is due to some sort of financial hardship or like familiar hardship where they had to drop out for health reasons that were either theirs or a loved ones or whatever, versus like those who failed out. I knew someone who the class had 3 exams. He only went to school twice, so he only went to class twice, so you do the math. He missed 1 exam, failed the class, failed out, and I just don't think it'd be fair for an electrician who chose to do his trade, was being a little bit more fiscally responsible and is now a successful electrician, why that debt is now transferred to him.
Yeah, the current way they're doing it, that's 100% correct. So what I'm talking about, I think, would be the incentive is the colleges then no longer want to bring in that person who's just going to be there, and then they take because right now, if you're the dude who goes to college and you're just going to sit in your dorm room and go to class once a quarter, and then the rest of the time you're just going to party and drink, like that person no longer can go to college because the colleges won't allow them to go there because there's a cost to that dude being there. Where now, currently, that dude goes to college, parties his butt off, that kid pays the money to be there. College is like, I don't really care. Sure, stay. You're paying me. Why would I get rid of you? Right? Or if you do it the other way, the college is going to there's going to be the vetting process on the college's end to vet out people who they think would do that. Right? Kind of like NCAA football or basketball or whatever, right? Like they're vetting out people who will make it through the program because they want to have people who are successful in the program. And then also vice versa too, is that kid whose mom or dad said, no, you have to go to college. I don't care if you don't want to go to college. You just want to become a, electrician or whatever. I don't care if you want, just go. You have to get 4-year degree. Doesn't matter. It's good for you. That's no longer going to be a thing. Right? There's going to be the people who want to do it. They're going to be like, because there's such a barrier to entrance now under that new system, where they're going to be like, well, no, there's no longer worth me doing that. I can just go get an electrician's degree, or I can go to a 2-year tech school. Right?
And even on the university's ends, like you're saying, the university on their end would want to keep those kind of students out because they don't want to have to foot that bill.
Yeah. So there'd be an incentive on that end to not let those. Maybe even have those start degrees up for electricians, right? Maybe Maybe Yale decides they want to have an electrician program because there's money. Because that's true. Like if you get a 2-year degree, usually you make more money right off the bat than most people who go to a 4-year degree. Just because there's a massive need for people who do trades right now. There's a huge short of people who do trades. Which, if you ever want to listen to a good podcast, Mike Bro has one where he talks about that. Dirty Jobs guy. He talks about the trades. He's all anti-college, go to the trades, and he's a good one if you're ever interested in that.
No, I
good
think
one to listen to.
I think that would be a good one to listen to because I agree. I think college is a waste of money for maybe at least 50%, maybe even up to 70-80% of all the majors you don't need some sort of 4-year bachelor's degree for. And I think pushing people into that when you have good trades is good money to be made in trades, and especially when we have such a shortage of those in trades, just seems silly. And this issue just keeps perpetuating itself too, because now if everyone gets a bachelor's, well, now the bachelor's degree is equivalent to your high school diploma. So now now to stand out, you need your master's, and then it'll just happen the same thing. Now everyone has to get their master's, and now everyone has to get their doctorate, and then they're gonna have to create something above doctorate to help distinguish people from one another. We will be right back. We're actually going to take a little break right here. We'll hear a word from our sponsor of this episode, Anchor. So we're going to transition away from the student loan crisis. Now, talked about that being a big part of the Democrats' plan for the midterms, despite the fact they don't really have a plan, this convenient political timing. So I want to transition a little bit to what their actual plans for the midterms are. So we both live and frequent swing states, and we got Arizona, Pennsylvania, a little bit of Georgia. So what have you seen a lot in terms of political ads in these states?
Yeah, political ads. Well, luckily I'm pretty smart when it comes to media and consuming it. I do not have cable. I do not watch local news. I do not watch national news. I don't have any social media. So I've been able to steer clear of a lot of it. Now saying that, around me, it's been a lot of Fetterman versus Oz, which is a really bizarre race because Fetterman is having, he had a stroke in the middle of it, which for any politician would be, holy crap, this dude had a stroke and he's running for Senate. For some reason, we can't talk about that. So it's like pretend that never happened type deal, which is an interesting, like, why wouldn't you replace him if you were a Democrat? I don't quite understand that strategy. Just like sweep it under the rug. And it brings up another point that a lot of Democrats are doing, which is kind of alarming, is he refuses to debate. Just refuses, just flat out says, I won't debate Oz. I think he finally agreed to have one, but it's like after early voting happens, so people will already cast the vote before they get to hear what he says.
That's interesting.
On the debate
stage. That's really convenient for him. I was wondering if he ever agreed to debate Oz. Last I had heard, he was saying that he wasn't. We're seeing the exact same thing here in Arizona with our governor. Our governor race, the Democratic candidate for governor is refusing to debate the Republican candidate. Not that that's necessarily new for the Democratic candidate, Katie Hobbs. She refused to debate in her primary as well. So obviously she's either ashamed of her policies. I can't really think of a reason why you wouldn't debate. The reason she keeps putting forth is that it would be a circus, that if she were to debate Carrie Lake, it would be an absolute circus. She's above that. She's not gonna get drawn into that, which is interesting for me to hear, because you think a circus would make you look better. If one candidate's going to absolutely make it a crap show and you are able to rise above it, you think that would swing people into your favor. I guess she's not thinking that.
Yeah, and I think if any of your listeners really, I would say the one thing they should take from this kind of aspect of it is, if the person you are relying on for like running stuff like you're voting on, they're not willing to explain their ideas, you probably shouldn't vote for them, because who knows what they're going to do, right? They could change their mind halfway through and say, you know what, no, I'm not going to do that anymore.
So I think Katie Hobbs' refusal to debate lends into her lends into like a lot of transparency issues. I have a hard time. Um, I hope that Arizonans have a hard time voting for someone who really hasn't been in the public eye or only allows herself to be in the public eye when she's not fielding any questions. When she's on friendly mainstream media, she's refused. I've seen in videos of her refusing to talk to Arizona voters. Project Veritas had a great video where she went running, literally spilled her drink, left it there for the poor restaurant people to clean up, and then locked herself in a bathroom. So that is who you want to be your governor.
Yeah, it's important to realize these people are not like the Messiah. They're not some super genius people that went to school that's going to fix all your problems. There's nothing special about them compared to you. Could run. Anybody you can run. There's no difference, right? So the idea that this person is any elected official is going to be Lord and Savior, everyone should wash that out of their heads. And the reason I say that is because if they're not willing to debate their ideas, you should immediately cast them out as a vote. Whether or not you agree with the Republican or Democrat or whatever, if they're not willing to explain what they believe in and they want to run shit, like they shouldn't even be in the candidacy.
No, absolutely.
They're not willing to talk about it.
Absolutely. And she had
that's the whole point, right?
She had a whole big thing about her. I love transparency. I'm committed to being transparent, but it's like you refuse to talk about your ideas. So you are smart. You're a lot smarter than I am. You are not in politics or local news or stuff like that. I am unfortunately the degenerate that follows kind of that stuff. I watch a lot of YouTube, so I'm just getting slammed by political ads right now. Right now, I'm taking a lot of it on the chin. As long as these Democrats are wasting their ad money on trying to convince me to vote for them, I figure, that's money wasted on their end. So I'll save all of my listeners. I'm gonna single-handedly deplete their war chests. But all their ads seem to really be targeting the Republicans, making the Republicans seem really evil. A lot of it is, Kari Lake is too dangerous for Arizona. Blake Masters, too dangerous for Arizona. And it's been an interesting transition that I've watched because Mark Kelly, the Democratic senator who's the incumbent here, in 2020 and 2021 was running ads saying how his policies were helping Arizonans. It's interesting because I don't see a single one of those ads running now. He can't run these ads anymore because I think it's quite clear through his policies failures, which are actually clearly foreseen economic consequences of his poor decisions costing Arizonans money. So I think that's interesting that the Democrats are really standing on nothing to try to win this election. They're not trying to go on their past 2 years of success, because remember, the Democrats have been in control for the past 2 years. They've had majority in the Senate, House, and they have the presidency, and they have nothing to show for it.
Yeah, and that's why they don't want to debate, right? Is because they have an entire machine behind them that can spin whatever web they want. They don't have to be able to. They don't have to be able to explain what they want to do or explain why everything's in the crapper with inflation and stuff. They don't have to. Just like Biden doesn't have to. I mean, look at some of the gaslighting coming out of the White House. I mean, it's just mind-boggling that these fact checkers that are so great at their job, suddenly took a day off whenever he says something. It's like just blatant lies too. It's not even like it's a fib. It's like just blatantly lied. And then if there's a good example too, where I think a lot of people are aware, Democrat-wise, where if they go up, they can't defend what the president is doing. They can't defend what these policies are or what they want the policies to be. Or when they say, Kari, you said it's Kari Lake, right? Yeah. So when they say she's the world's worst person and she's, the devil incarnated, if you ask them, okay, explain why, they can't do it. Because all they want to do is fearmonger you into saying, like, because it's true. If you were to tell me, if I vote for this person's the devil. If I vote for her, then I'm voting for the devil. Well, I'm not going to vote for the devil. I mean, come on, right?
I'll give you some slack here.
Yeah, right? So, like, if that's all, but if I don't have to explain myself, which, first of all, if anybody ever tells you that, you should first say, okay, explain to me why. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle on. Just number one is be curious. I'm curious if I hear like any Democratic point of view or policy. I almost always look to see, okay, who came up with this? What are they thinking, and why are they thinking? And
Hmm.
I go into it with the mindset of I want to change my mind and agree with this.
Hmm.
I usually don't because I have what about my own thought process on things, which is what you get as you get older and grow and mature. But I always go with the mindset of, ooh, a smart person came up with this, and this is an idea they're having, or a person came up with it, and this is a. I should find out more about this and see if maybe it's something I'm interested in. Maybe this is a good idea,
Hmm.
right? It's
Hmm.
just the reason I'm conservative is because 99% of the time I've found that it's not a good idea. Whenever I've
Hmm.
looked up like democratic policies,
Hmm.
like, but a good example is of the BS that gets spewed, and the reason Democrats aren't going to debate or holding the debates for as long as possible, or holding from doing them for as long as possible, is J.D. Vance, which is running for, I believe, Senate seat in Ohio. He recently had a debate with his with the person he's running against, and the person he's running against thought he had an "I got you" moment.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure if you saw this, but the guy goes, "J.D. Vance is so against abortion where he would not allow." There was apparently a girl that was like 14, I think, or something like that,
Hmm.
in Ohio who got raped by an illegal immigrant
Hmm.
and had to get an abortion. And the left totally leaned into it, like Republicans wouldn't even let this girl get an abortion.
Hmm.
Like totally leaned, like everyone in the country that was Democrat leaned into it. Like look how evil these people are. They wouldn't even let this girl who was raped by an illegal alien. Well, so he pulled that up in the debate stage, and he literally looked over at JD Vance and said, "This guy's so extreme where he wouldn't even allow a 14-year-old girl who was raped to get an abortion."
Hmm.
And JD Vance, this is why they won't debate Republicans, because JD Vance did what I hope they got all conservatives would do in this situation. Is he looked them straight in the eyes and said, first off, that is not my point of view. I've said my point of view, and then he explained it. He said, I always think in extreme situations, like a 14-year-old girl who gets raped by an illegal immigrant should be able to get an abortion, which is what 99% of people who are pro-life say.
Hmm.
Yes, in extreme situations like this, that are one-offs,
Hmm.
that are terrible,
Hmm.
yes, that is something that should be medically allowed,
Hmm.
right? Which is the right answer. But then he even took it one step further, and this is what makes this video so great. He goes, but let's talk about that situation, because this illegal immigrant was let in because of your policies.
Hmm.
This person, if you would have done your job, would have never even been here to rape the girl to begin with.
Hmm.
Which is the right thing to do, because they like to play these little games with you where they want to switch things around so you're the bad guy, or take something and switch it around, and then they use these word traps to try to get you where then no longer are you talking about illegal immigration or this, but you're talking on these nuances of these one-off situations that are super extreme, that are horrible, and you can't get away from it because you have to be sympathetic toward this horrible thing, because we're all sympathetic toward this horrible thing,
Hmm.
right? Well, JD Vance, this is why, I don't know, I know he's a trained lawyer, so he's probably a pretty smart dude. But this is where the brilliant part of it was. He goes, well, wait a minute, let's talk about, we don't want people to get raped, right? Especially 14-year-old girls. Why did you let this legal alien in? Why didn't you deport them?
Hmm.
Which is the right answer. It's not, see, that's a smart move, because that's a Democrat's answer if it would have been switched roles.
Hmm.
So it was smart because he turned it around on them, which is something that conservatives historically have been terrible at. So
Yeah.
seeing someone do it was quite rewarding.
Oh, and what I like what Carrie Lake's doing, because she's kind of being slammed by the leftist media, like, oh, abortion this, abortion that, and she's like, you guys talk a lot of game about, what my policies are, how popular they are or not. But let's talk about my opponent. Let's talk about, let's flip the script. Let's talk about Katie Hobbs here, someone who wants abortion up to and including the point of birth, which is vastly unpopular amongst most Americans. Like you said earlier, majority of Americans, particularly on abortion, approve of some ban, but timing is generally where a lot of people disagree. And you know what? You guys can absolutely take that up to the states that you guys reside in and hash those details out. But I think it was good for her to flip the script, because Katie Hobbs's radical view on abortion is not popular amongst Americans either, especially, that's what needs to get said. That's, I think, would be a good winner for Republicans, unrestricted access to abortion up to and including the time of birth is not popular amongst Americans, and that's what the Democrats want.
Yeah, the only worry I have with that is, and this is not about the abortion side of it, but about the midterm sides, what Carrie Lake's doing. And she's doing it right too, just like J.D. Vance is. But some Republicans are doing it the old school way. And my only worry with that is if there's, how many people live in the United States that are voters, right? I don't know, 100 million people maybe?
Yeah, I think it's like
200 million people? Yeah, something like that, right? We'll just say 150 million people. All those people do not watch the news or have the nuance that you and I have. So when they see this person, like they're not even going to watch a debate if the debate, or let me reverse that. They may only get the info they need for the candidate they want to vote for from a debate stage. So if that debate doesn't happen, where do they get their info on who they're going to vote for? They get it from these shock and awe moments on the media. If there's 9 media companies out there and 8 of them are in the pocket of one side, what are the odds they're going to see the side for Democrat versus the side for conservative? Right? So if you put it towards a reasonable person, which this is reasonable, if I'm busy doing, running a small business or something like that, I don't have time to keep up with the news. If all I'm hearing is how these people are going to kill everyone that comes around you, or they're trying to do all these horrible, horrific things, I'm going to be like, well, hell, I'm not voting for that person. And then I'm not going to educate myself either because I'm too busy or I don't have the time. I'm trusting what these institutions are supposed to be trusted to tell me. Now, the good news is these institutions have shot themselves in the foot so much where more and more people are being like, wait a minute, maybe I should look at this. But my fear is the strategy they have is that it's not going to work. Like, I don't think it's as in the bag as people say it is for conservatives. I don't think it's black and white. Like we're going to sweep the House and the Senate like people think. Just because I don't think people have the time, especially now with inflation and all that stuff. Like there's too many other things on their plate to worry about than to look into the minutia of all these details and stuff like that. Good news is inflation typically is something like this. Whoever's in charge, it's a referendum on them. But
yeah, I definitely think it's absolutely not in the bag. Conservatives have a lot of groundwork to do. But, where Biden is right now, he's as popular as Trump was during his presidency, which is I think saying a lot. Biden constantly being puffed up by the media, and we saw the House flip we saw the House flip. We saw, I think Trump lost like 3 to 5 Senate seats, something like that. So we could be in for a shock. Will there be shenanigans? I don't know, and I don't want to say, but
that's the other scary thing with the midterms, right? Is historically too, or at least compared to the 2020 election, there was some shady stuff that happened with laws, and in my state of Pennsylvania, they never changed those laws back. So some of the laws that were unconstitutionally based off not the U.S. Constitution, but the Pennsylvania Constitution, they changed voting laws unilaterally without the support of anyone other than the guy who runs Pennsylvania, the governor, who is a Democrat. So of course things were changed in their favor. And my worry is that happened in a lot of states. Most of those states did not change their laws back, which means that those things that are blatantly unconstitutional in favor of Democrats are still in place. So it gives them already an advantage to going into it. And then some states did change it. Now, what happened to those states that went in and said, wait a minute, all this stuff that happened because of COVID in 2020 and changed the election, we're going to move it back and change it. You remember those states that did that?
Yeah, they got called Jim Crow 2.0.
Yeah, I remember Atlanta, Georgia did it. And I don't think anyone really was upset with them, were they? Oh, yeah. Wait, that's right. It was Jim Crow 2.0. That's right. So, I mean, it just, and that's like, going back to the, like, stuff like that drives me nuts because it's the common sense tells you that it's all bullshit. It's all BS. Like Jim Crow 2.0. I mean, really? You're going to compare that? But here's the thing. A lot of people, I think, look at that. And they just say, I don't have time to look into it. I'm just going to trust this source because I've trusted them in the past. New York Times, they're legit. They've been around 100 years. I'll trust them. And that's what worries me is is that it's like I don't trust polls. I don't read the news, or I do read the news. I don't watch the news. I don't watch local news. I don't have social media, but I do read news, and I do look at polls. And polls are so untrustworthy nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. No doubt about it.
I think it'll be interesting. I think it's going to be a little bit better than we perhaps think, but I am definitely guilty of looking at polls, even though they've been incredibly wrong in the past and still continue to be incredibly wrong. I like to give most of the polls I look at like a 2 or 3 point Democrat bias, at least.
Yeah.
Which I think will make things interesting in November. But I saw something on Twitter that was particularly interesting to me. A lot of these states, the Republican governor is almost the runaway favorite, yet the Senate race, the national Senate race, is super close or even favoring Democrats. So that, to me, I think automatically seems a little suspicious. But maybe the Senate candidates are super unpopular. Maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, that's hard to say. Because, it's kind of like the Fetterman thing in Pennsylvania. It's like, half of that, too, is like picking a crappy candidate. Like, sure, Oz is Oz, right? Going against Fetterman, but like that's the best he could do was a dude who was a doctor on TV. Like, that's it.
Yeah,
really. There's not like a lawyer or someone who's been in politics locally. Like Fetterman, remember, he's been in politics. I actually interviewed him for a documentary like 10 years ago, maybe even more than 10 years ago. And so he's been doing it a long freaking time. And the best the conservatives could come up with was a reality TV show doctor. Like, yeah, nothing against the guy. He's probably a smart dude, and he seems to be conservative. But it's just like, it's shocking that that's the best they could come up with.
Especially because Fetterman's so weak. Like, in theory, I think Pennsylvania could be a runaway state.
Granted, I hope the guy's healthy. Yeah, granted, I hope the guy's healthy, but having a stroke in the middle of a campaign and then just pretending it never happened, like, it's mind-boggling that that's reality.
Yeah, and I think here in Arizona, Kelly's a weak candidate, but he, the Republican candidate's kind of struggling against him as well. Just because,
yeah, and how much of that's BS too, like just media, like polls and all that crap, right?
Yeah,
where it's not actually struggling.
Yeah, no, that is true. Election subversion strategy is to demotivate the voting populace, and that can be done through polls or because if it's like, oh man, there's no way my candidate's going to win, I'm not going to vote for him. Or I'm not.
Trump
I'm not
did
even
that to himself for the Senate candidate. Remember, Trump did it to himself for a Senate candidate in 2020. He said it's a fraud. They stole the election. There's no reason to even go out and vote. And everyone was like, "Wait, what are you saying? No, go out and vote in the runoff election. Don't tell him not to do this."
Yeah,
yeah. He was stupid enough.
So I'm hoping the election rhetoric doesn't hurt Republicans. Republicans are like, "Oh, I'm not going to go out and vote." No, if you're listening to this show, everyone listening to the show, go out and vote. I've said that since always, forever and always. Get out and vote.
Yeah, it's almost like I was thinking about this the other day. This might totally just be an analytical thing I was thinking about. But there was when Hillary Clinton was running for election, if you remember, it was a 99.9% chance she was going to win. And then it was a shock when Trump came through and got it. How much of that shock, how much of that win was people who were so sure Hillary Clinton was going to win, they didn't go out to vote?
It could have been a large portion. Definitely. It's like, she's got this in the bag. She's got this in the bag. I'm not going to vote.
Yeah. Why would you? If there's a 99.9% chance, why would you spend an hour waiting in line to vote? Right? I probably wouldn't. If you told me I could go vote, but the candidate I'm voting for has a 99.9% chance of winning, well, I'm probably not going to wait an hour in line to do it and waste my day. Right? So how much of that was that? I don't know the answer to that, but I wonder if it seems like that's their strategy too, or at least the media, the subversion part of it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, don't worry about voting for Senate, because the Democrat candidates are going to run away with it. But I have a hard time thinking that you're going to show up because like all these places have governors to vote for too. It's like you're going to show up, you're going to vote for your governor, you're not going to vote for the senator. I don't know. That to me, I have a hard time thinking like, like you said, I waited an hour in line. I might as well vote for everybody on the ballot.
Yep. Yeah. Here's another crazy thing I found out the other day, which I probably just because I don't watch the news, I didn't realize this. But some of the biggest financiers for conservative, like the extreme conservative candidates, were Democrats.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre,
yeah.
Right? And their strategy, which I don't know how this is a good strategy. Their strategy was, these people are so extreme. Let's get them elected in the primary so we can run against them.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you want it? What if you lose? You say these people are Nazis, but you want to put a Nazi in power because you want to run against them?
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that.
It's definitely dangerous. I mean, my dad sent me an article about that, and I flipped through, and a lot. I mean, it seemed like for the most part the strategy didn't pay off. It seemed like, well, I mean, honestly, for Democrats, you don't need to outspend to get bad candidates. You just need to wait for Trump to endorse them in some cases.
Well, that's the weird part, right? Is what's the argument? Because the referendum is not going to be per candidate at this point. It's all about inflation and the economy and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they just want change. You know, people are just going to want change to change sake, so things get better.
I just think it's short-sightedness. It's like, but then it's true. What happens if they win, and what happens if they get elected? So now this person that in your eyes, in the Democrats' eyes, is way too conservative or way too far right, is now ruling over you. It's definitely not a for sure strategy. It looks like it's worked a little bit in the past, from what I could gather from the article, but definitely not a for sure strategy.
Well, it always makes me think the people I want to make those because these are decisions that could affect your life. I want them to be pretty well educated and have pretty good integrity. If someone's willing to do that, they don't have any integrity. They're lacking integrity if they're willing to put money towards a candidate that they don't like because they think it'll be easy to win. I mean, it's morally pretty abusive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's definitely scummy, absolutely. But I don't think it's ever stopped the Democrats before.
No, and in their defense, it hasn't stopped any political person of any party. Scummy and politics go together like a hand in a glove.
Yeah, absolutely, hand in hand.
Yeah,
I definitely think it'll be a very, very interesting midterm season. I'm looking forward to voting on election day with my state required voter ID as a good little noodle, like a good citizen. So really looking forward to that. Thank you so much, Mark, for coming on. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
I'll just say one more thing, and I just watched this the other day. 2,000 Mules. If you haven't seen it, it's a pretty wild movie. Go watch it. It has some questions. 2,000 Mules.
Well, it'll be interesting. I don't think I've even seen it, so I'll have to sit down and watch it. So, all right, 2,000 Mules. Add it to your watch list. Also, make sure to keep up with Big Red. We're still here. We're still coming out with poignant political conversations. All right, thanks so much, Mark. This is Big Red signing off for the Big Red for America show. See you all next time.
See ya. Thanks.
If you want to see more from the Big Red from America team, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Getter, and Parler. Once again, this is Big Red signing off for the Big Red for America show, where the opinions are always right and the facts are always cited.